Tiamat is etched into the wood. The room is hot, perhaps a touch muggy, and schizophrenic rain roars from the screen door. The floor isn't clean, but I've seen worse, and a spacious table houses the activity of the night. I glance over my character sheet, and my leg begins to bounce. Elkin is so dead, I realize. Across from me, Sydney's enthralled in the roleplay, and as my attention is drawn to her, I'm suddenly sucked into another world. The ceiling is low, and flickering fluorescent lights illuminate a couple dozen Cathar, all packed into a crowded space and anxiously fingering their bone blades. Eldon's hackles raise, and Talia takes a step forward, her arms out as if to hold the tension at bay. There isn't time for this. We have a common enemy. It's in both of our best interests to work together. She draws the last two words out and looks Eldon straight in the eyes. Work together with a traitor? Sammy's voice explodes, and the Cathar ignite. A frenzy of insults and unrest begin to churn. Samwise smirks, and he looks around at the people, and then he turns his eyes to Eldon. His expression mutates to one of deep-seated hate. You think you are still one of us? The last word, a hiss, causes Samwise lips to curl back, revealing a predatory set of teeth. The hair all across Eldon's body stands on end, and his muscles go taut. His eyes lock with Samwise, and he bares his teeth back. Samwise straightens, as if to hold himself aloft from Eldon's aggression, but his gaze never falters. If you are truly one of us, then come. Let us end this. Samwise flicks out his claws. Instinctually, and without a moment hesitation, Eldon let his sniper fall from his back. He felt a fire he had long stifled ignite within him. He was a Cathar, and Cathar don't use blasters. As if compelled by Samwise' challenge, Eldon pulled two viral daggers from his cloak and gets into a stance. I need everyone, John's excited voice snaps me back to the dingy college living room, to roll for initiative. I reach my trusty metal D20 and shake it in my hand for a moment for good luck. Then I release it to clatter across the table. I cringe as I view the result. A 5? I grab the traitorous little orb and put it back in its bag. Still, I can add my charisma modifier. What are those initiative rolls? John asks from behind the wooden DM screen. 10, 19, 14, I call out. John stops for a moment and grins. He got a 15. Suddenly, Samwise explodes toward Eldon, covering the 15 feet of distance in the blink of an eye. He swings, and Eldon raises his blade to parry, but Samwise' arm contorts in a seemingly impossible fashion, and his attack lands. His claw rakes across Eldon's lightly armored chest. Eldon grits his teeth as he feels the claw slice into his flesh, but the pain is just an echo. Without a thought, he drops on all fours and catapults past Samwise, digging his dagger deep into Samwise' side as he passes. With a burst of speed, he crosses the entirety of the arena. Eldon whips around, expecting to see Samwise crouched on the floor, or at least rapidly losing blood, but instead Samwise charging toward him, seemingly unfazed. Where there should have been a bloody wound, there's only a knot of muscle and flesh, as if the sinews themselves had closed the gash. Samwise closes the distance, and his first strike is for Eldon's head. Eldon weaves lefts and deflects the blow off his arm, but something cracks as he does so. Then, with an unprecedented explosion of speed, Samwise plunges his claw into Eldon's exposed side. Ooh, the DM cringes and looks at the dice. I grimace. Please tell me that's not... Yup, John responds. That's a critical hit. Eldon gasps as a wave of pain washes through his body. The adrenaline isn't enough to keep it at bay this time, and suddenly reflexive fear takes control of him. He's going to die. Eldon yanks himself free of the claws, and with a burst of speed only a Cathar can muster, flings himself to the other side of the room. His dagger manages another shallow cut, this time along Samwise' arm, but the attack is merely an afterthought. Samwise turns around and starts chasing after his prey. What? Are you just going to run away? Eldon doesn't even hear the taunt. He can feel himself rapidly losing blood, and blackness obscures the edges of his vision. He raises his arm and fires a blast from his concealed blaster as Samwise approaches. The hit connects, but Samwise barely seems to notice. Even in sacred combat, you dishonor your people. Eldon falls to one knee as the giant rushes toward him. Hey, John. Jeremy's voice emerges from the Discord call. Can I jump in here before the Catboy gets his face smashed in? John shrugs. Sure. Roll initiative. 19. Alright, you beat both their initiatives, so you're up. Samwise is only 15 feet away now, but before he could draw any closer, a human-like droid steps into his path. Conjecture. Your limbs have moved in ways impossible for your species and body type. I suspect bioengineered physical enhancements. Is that not against the rules? HK tilts up his head, and from his eye, a projected recording of the fight thus far begins to play, with each naturally impossible movement highlighted and annotated. The crowd of Cathar murmur, as the recording makes it quite clear Samwise is no ordinary Cathar. Out of my way! Samwise swings his clawed fist into the droid's armored frame. The droid, uninjured, draws two vibro axes. Statement. Hostility detected. Eldon notices Tralia try to reach out and heal him from behind. He bats her hand away. Don't get involved, he growls. Sydney looks at me, concerned. Dude, you're going to die. I shrug. Look, I know that, and out of character, thank you, but that's just not something Elkin would let happen. Sydney purses her lips and turns to John. Can I try to sneakily heal Eldon? John thinks for a moment. I'll allow it. Make a contested athletics check. I look over at him and roll my eyes. Athletics, huh? Not a sleight of hand? John stands up. You're a rogue! Your sleight of hand is literally plus 11. I need to give Talia at least a chance. I chuckle. Fair enough. And once more my dice clatters across the table. I read off my roll. 11. Sydney grimaces and draws an exaggerated smile. 4? She says tentatively. Yeah, no. John turns to his computer. Jeremy, there's an angry enhanced Catman who just punched you. You gonna take that? Jeremy's militaristic response rings back. No, sir. I whack him. John grins. All right, roll attack. HK's eyes redshift, and with machine precision, its axes cut into Samai where his muscle enhancements are weakest. Conjecture. How about you pick on someone your own size? Samai tries to retaliate, but the droid deftly avoids his blows. HK folds in the waist, leaving Samai's swing to hit nothing but air. But before Samai can even recover and bring his arms back to center, HK's vibro axes plunge into his unguarded chest. Samai falters as the blades cut deep. Suddenly, a female Cathar appears behind Samai. You lied to us, she hisses, and slams the butt of her blade into the back of Samai's head. He slumps forward, unconscious. Kyra stands over the incapacitated form of her former leader. Hypocrite. She spits upon his fallen form before turning and pushing her way through the crowd. Eldon's arms begin to shake uncontrollably as the adrenaline begins to wear off. He feels sick. The Cathar rush around their fallen leader in what seems to be an amorphous blob. Everything is blurry and distant. Talia's face comes into view, and her voice, an echo, says something he can't quite make out. Eldon, going to heal... Everything goes black. So, what do you think of my D&D rendition? Not everything is quite how it happened. I changed a few lines to make it sound a little better. And I had Eldon go unconscious at the end, which didn't actually happen. But otherwise, everything is accurate. I include all the lines I could remember, and I think I gave a pretty accurate rendition of the experience. See, I wanted to depict how it actually feels to play D&D. At least D&D that's good. It's like toggling between two worlds, and I think I represented that pretty well. I also hope that, I portrayed what's so enticing about the whole experience. It's like playing a video game, but the screen is your imagination. And at least for me, that makes it way higher resolution. So yeah, if that made you want to play some D&D, I achieved my goal. And if it didn't, then I guess you don't realize what you're missing out on. That day, I finished the last life demo, and I woke up at 1 in the afternoon and began working on that life demo until 5 in the evening, which included recording time. I already had written some of it, but it's not like the whole process only took me 4 hours because, I got some of it done before. But still, the whole event was so much shorter than times past, and that was big nice. I should make life demo shorter, if for no other reason than my own sanity. After finishing that process and sending it out, I watched Weathering with You, an excellent anime movie with Mom and Grace, while eating canes, and they both really liked it, so that was great. Pretty great anime movie. Then after that, I really didn't know what to do, so I just played Red Matter 2, a VR game, and watched this anime, but it got sketch, and otherwise it was really interesting, though, so that was big sad, and I had to stop it. But yeah, that was the day. Sunday, I went to church, played Magic, had a fantastic game of D&D. The roleplay was just excellent. Very sparkling. Oh, give me a second. And then I played Magic games with Sydney, John, and Neo until about 10 p.m., after which I went home and worked on many things for my Battleboard project. The next day I went to class, as per usual, but as I went to go to my second class, lo and behold, my tire had popped. Thus I was forced to briskly walk the distance, my bike tire that is, arriving just in time. And then once class had finished, I walked my bike back home. I then had Funame, rode my mom's bike for the rest of the day, and then at work, I wrote this live email intro because I could, and I had nothing better to do. I mean, let's be honest. A bit of creative writing now and then, it's like chicken noodle soup for the soul. Once work ended, I promptly bought a new bike tire and a tube from Walmart and proceeded to replace my bike tire, which was simultaneously easier and harder than I expected. I got the task done in like 30 minutes, but I had a harder time putting in the tire in the rim than I anticipated, but I got it done. I then drove to Monday night after getting there a little bit late, and we watched the next 2 episodes of Bufuri, which were mostly good, but they used 3D animation for like a whole 10 minutes, which is actually such a big sad. I hate 3D animated anime. Like, I actually just won't watch them. If there are parts of the 3D animated, I tolerate them, usually, but But if it's significant, it lowers my respect for the anime a ton. And the fact that one of my favorite animes fell to the dark side was deeply disappointing. Just gross. From there, Monday night activities consist of various forms of magic until 11, but those various forms included one where I got to play my CDH commander, so that was actually great. Probably my favorite magic game since I got back from New Zealand. And yeah, once that ended, we called it night, because school's next morning, and I went to bed at midnight. Tuesday, I rose early to engage in a lengthy drive to Estes to see my doctor up there. Why, might you ask? Is my doctor in Estes when there's like 60 plus doctors in Fort Collins? Because once, long ago, I needed a doctor semi-urgently, and my first availability was in Estes. So I made this guy my doctor, and since then I haven't changed anything because I haven't needed to go to the doctor. Hence my drive to Estes. Seeing the lunacy of this predicament, I am now working on changing that and making my at-home doctor clear, near my home. Anyway, on the way up, I listened to a really good real theology episode. Once there, I got to him and talked to him, and he was like, "Take antibiotics, bye." And I was like, "Good talk." This doctor clearly does not like people. Maybe, that's why he was available early on, all those ages ago. I then drove back down and listened mostly to music upon returning to Fort Collins. I then picked up my microbiome nukes, Funimade, and then proceeded to bike down to the ID2 product lab and print some stuff. I then went to class, did more 3D printing, watched some Blue Lock with Mom while I ate dinner, and then I attended Ratio. And while normally that last event would be trivial, this time it finally included a whiteboard fight with Alan, which I've dearly missed. Thus it was special. However, he added very little to the conversation. I was mostly teaching him stuff, so it wasn't a pure whiteboard fight. But still it's a whiteboard fight, and you take what you can get. Also completely unrelated, but look at my phoenix. It looks so pretty when it rains. Anyway, after the whiteboard fighting, Alan and I, with Alan, I then went home, watched an anime episode, and went to sleep. The following Wednesday, I had classes, Funimate, more classes, and then I did work at work, in which I tried to convert from millimeters to pixels, which I will tell you is not an easy conversion, but I did get it done eventually. So that project took up most of my time at work that day. I then tried to 3D print more deck boxes, but it didn't work. And then I tried to pick up my repaired, quote-unquote, computer, but they lied to me. And I went over to the Morgan Library and successfully brainstormed with my Barbie boat battle partners. I've talked about this, right? My Mech 200 battle boat competition. I'm going to assume I did, and I move on. From there, I went to Southgate to join in the tail end of the youth group, aka Spikeball. That happened after. Johanna did pretty well once we were warmed up. I then went to the Myers house to play some Magic, after which I went to Wendy's and discovered that it is indeed true that the greatest burger to ever exist has been annexed for no reason and now no longer exists. Thus, Benji and I decided to try the late bacon pub's replacement, and we both deemed it kind of meh. Sure, it was unique, but nothing compared to the great bacon pub burger. So that was tragic, but I got food, so, I guess that was good. From there, I played one more game of Magic, in which my team destroyed, and then drove me back to my car, and I went home and to sleep. The next day was Thursday, and due to the way I scheduled the semester, I had the availability to sleep in, so I ended up sleeping until noon, because I could, since I was up late with the Myers last night, or the night before. But usually, I'll take it to wake up doing normal, quiet time stuff and study philosophy. I then got more Magic deck boxes printed, did Funime, had classes, work, and then did homework until during the later of those activities. From there, I studied more philosophy, watched more Blue Lock, and had dinner with Mom, and then studied more philosophy before watching a YouTube video because I was nervous for soccer and I couldn't focus on philosophy. Also, soccer started really late this time. It started 10:30 p.m. Honestly, I tried something different, but this team was really good at keeping possession of the ball and pressing. So when I tried to pressure them and steal the ball, it just meant I ran around a lot. Hence, it was probably my least favorite game yet, because I really didn't do anything cool. However, I did run a lot more, so at least I got good exercise. But yeah, once that ended, it was midnight, so I slept. Friday, I had school, did soccer, did homework at work, and then once I got home, I decided I just pondered what to do with my life. Then for the next 2 hours or so, I reached a decision that I would revert to my old ways and build Legos, which is mildly enjoyable. And I built this layered spaceship thing. I actually always make spaceships. I think it's because every time I build, I'm struck by some unique way to combine bricks, and that unique way, only makes sense in a spaceship. Thus, everything's a spaceship. There's a spaceship. Spaceship. Yeah, so did that while listening to Majesty of Reason videos. I then watched some more Blue Lock with Mom and ate dinner, and then I finished Red Matter 2, which is the VR game I've been working through. And then I was severely let down by the ending. Plus, the game got way too creepy for me to enjoy it. And then I watched some anime, and after a moment of reflection, decided that anime wasn't how I wanted to spend my life. So I did philosophy instead of anime until the rest of that day. The next morning, I woke up later in the day, but I could do that because it was a Saturday. As I was peacefully sitting in my chair, the sound of Catholic falsehoods reached my ears, and of course, I am not one to stand for Catholic falsehoods. Not saying the falsehoods were Catholic, but rather the claims about the Catholics were falsehoods. Thus, I thought I would clarify. So spontaneously, I was like, "Hey, Grace, Renee, and Johanna, want to hear Catholic Talk Part 1? And surprisingly, they agreed. Hence, I hopped in Renee's car with the three of them and proceeded to give Catholic Talk Part 1 as we drove over to the Schroeder's house, because Grace was dog sitting for them. And first off, let me say, it was weird to be back in the house again. Way back in the day, I don't know, when I was 12 or so, I would go over there not infrequently. And, I hadn't actually been back there since, I was that age. So to step back through those doors and everything and have it be the same as 10 years ago was really a weird feeling. Anyway, that aside, I proceeded to continue giving Catholic talk to the three females for the next 2 hours or so. And I know Johanna paid attention because she got spontaneously quizzed at church later and did well. And I'm quite confident Renee retained it because she's asked a lot of good questions and looked like she was paying attention. But I'm also quite confident Grace did not retain almost anything. Grace always jokes she's dumb. And until this point, I've always been she's underestimating herself and she's kind of bad at math. I spent enough time teaching her in reteaching her math things that I'm convinced she's not good at math. But in general, I'm like, she's smart. She just wasn't living up to her potential. However, after these Catholic talks, I think she may actually have an average or below average intelligence, at least when it comes to paying attention and recalling things. Like, she did abysmally. So yeah, I guess the experience of Grace did genuinely change my perspective on her mental stats. Now, mind you, I don't think she's dumb. I've met dumb people and she's not that. But I do think she's average. At least that conclusion seems most likely to me. Anyways, that was interesting. But aside from that revelation, nothing particularly notable happened. Both Johanna and Renee were great students, and I think they've internalized the first part of Catholic Talk 1. So it was nice to further disseminate that knowledge. From there, Renee drove us back, and then I went straight to Alley Cat to reunite with Caleb Christian, who I haven't seen in literally 9 years. Not gonna lie, got a bit nervous that reunion, but Caleb was visibly shaking, although he tried to hide it, so it seems as if I was not the only one. Now, that conversation was quite interesting. First, the background you need to know is Caleb Christian and I were best friends back in grade school, both by title and relation. Hence, until 5th grade, we did everything together. Like, we were on the same soccer team, we were playmates and built Legos together, we built forts. He was my primary and dominant friend. He was also the first person I ever had what young me considered a deep conversation with. And honestly, that one conversation shaped what I wanted a friend ever after. It is literally because of Caleb and our relationship that I came to dislike small talk and pursue, the very kind of relationships that most of you know me for. There's more to be said about that, of course, and I know that because I spent 3 months of my life and 65,000 words introspecting about this issue, and others, of course. But for now, it's all the same. The point is, Caleb is an extremely influential force in my childhood self, and so seeing him again was more monumental than seeing most anyone after 10 years. So anyway, we had a very interesting conversation over the next 2.5 hours, and I can honestly say I've never met anyone that thinks the way he does. Caleb listened to literally thousands of hours of podcasts, mostly psychology focused, and you can tell it by the way he talks and thinks. He doesn't just know psychology, he's imbibed it. He breathes it, and it's very interesting. Now, I will say his thought is very fuzzy, and by that, I mean he doesn't have defined categories or strict definitions, or very clear and concise meaning of what it, he even means. And normally I find fuzzy minds quite off-putting, but in this particular case, I didn't feel that way. For some reason, the fuzziness had a sort of mystical intrigue to me. It had this deep-seated feeling that behind the fuzzy lay something hard, solid, and extremely useful, just waiting and begging to be brought into the light. It was very strange, and like I said, very unique. It was as if Caleb's fuzzy mind sparkled and promised returns, if only I would put in the work to discover what lay inside. Of course, that's all very vague, and I don't know exactly what I mean by when I say that. My gut vibe is fuzzy itself. But still, I disproportionately enjoyed the conversation, and despite me being quite upfront about the kind of relationship I was interested in moving forward, he was totally cool with being friends, and honestly, I was pretty excited. So yeah, a very good conversation, lots of things talked about, and once we reached a natural conclusion, we parted ways. From there, I did some Funime before hanging out with Joe. We decided to do this anime edit / Oculus puzzle combo, but since my computer still isn't fixed, it's actually been over a month. I tried to use Joe's software for editing, and holy cow, I found that annoying. After 15 minutes of trying, I realized I was just feeling immensely frustrated, and it was negative fun. So I rerouted us, and we just played Magic instead. I will say the results of those games were quite surprising, because Joe's Planeswalker deck consistently beat my Toxic deck, which until this point in time had gone practically undefeated in 1v1s. So yeah, that was quite the upset of 1v1 deck power. The other thing we did that day was an intro anime quiz where my guesses were weighted with a weight of 1/3 of Joe's guesses to try and level the playing field. But given those conditions, Joe absolutely destroyed me, so I think the weighting was a bit too harsh. Still, it was a great throwback to the old days when Joe and I used to hang out, and I very much enjoyed it. After going home and going to sleep the next day, I went to church and I found Noah and Melissa Sanders had sat right behind me. Apparently, they're church hunting, and given they haven't come back, I guess Southgate received a failing grade. Anyway, after that, we drove over to Poudre River, during which drive I catechized Grace. And then once we reached said river, after standing around awkwardly for a bit, Grace got baptized. Woo! So that was a big yay. We then had food thereafter, and Joe and Noah did deeply embarrassing dances, which will scar me for life. I then went to drive a full 2 hours to Estes. Now, this is another story in of itself. To begin, the cause of the meetup dates back to 9 months or something ridiculously long ago. Sometime way back, I think during spring break, Molly said she knew someone who she considered my female clone, and so she wanted me to have a meetup for a friendship date. Keyword being friendship. I was very explicit I'm not going on a date. So that was proposed, and I enthusiastically agreed. And then nothing. Nothing came about for the next forever, so of course I eventually thought the notion had perished. However, after I saw Molly at her mom's wedding reception, I reminded her of this notion, and about 2 weeks later, she said she was going to go on a hike with her friend, Hannah's her name, and wondered if I could do Sunday. Now, because it was an abnormal Sunday, where D&D wasn't happening, I actually could make it, so I said yes, and that was that. However, it was later sprung upon me that 6 other girls would be accompanying us, which, first off, is a very significant change in plans, as I'm now the only guy among 8 girls. But, being the stalwart man that I am, I do not fear the fair sex, and thus I girded myself and did not back down. In the end, it turned out that only one of the proposed other 6 girls came, so there was hardly any other female pack tactics that was employed in the following social engagement, which significantly boosted my odds of survival. Hence, I was very okay with the result. So yeah, I drove up there, met up with the 3 women, and then proceeded to wander about Estes, browsing shops, with no apparent purpose. It was a very good example of what girls normally do for fun. And man, do I pity girls, because it was so boring. But all in all, it didn't matter, because during such window shopping, I had a wide and varied conversation with the one non-Hannah, non-Molly girl, who I think, keyword, was named Danny. She was very strong conservative and a Calvinist. And while at first it made me excited, as I often, think Calvinists have a much more rigorous thought life than other theological traditions, in Danny's case, it meant more references to, let's reference God's unknowable nature and sovereignty at every turn to get out of thinking hard. AKA, it seemed to have the exact opposite effect of what I was hoping for. Still, the sovereignty cop-out wasn't too frequently used until I told her I thought voting wasn't worth my time. If I could pinpoint a moment at which Danny's tone of conversation shifted, I would say it was probably that one. Basically, for the entirety of time after that point, she refused to engage in reasonable conversation and basically ignored me. Like, she started talking exclusively to Hannah and Molly, and whenever I said something or asked something, she would just either give a very curt response or straight up not respond. So that was unpleasant. As for my conversation with Hannah, it fared better, but not fantastic, and in this case, that's very likely my fault. See, Hannah was talked up to be my philosophy clone, and of course, my philosophy clone would be S tier. So I approached the conversation the way only an S tier person would take well. And although I was very aware a non-S tier would have found the conversation quite rude, I just accepted that consequence from the outset. Like, after all, Hannah lives in Denver, and I don't really need to be on good terms with her, as I probably won't see her after this. So my mind was, what do I have to lose? So then, of course, she turned out to not be S tier, and there were complications for the following conversations. E.g., she just stopped talking and walked behind the rest of us for the remainder of the hike. See, I may have just come out and said something like, look, I'm trying to find someone really smart, and you seem kind of dumb, so I don't think you're going to fit that role. However, I would like to offer the opportunity to prove my initial assessment was wrong, and that you actually are super smart, and I misjudged you. Would you be willing to do that? And I didn't say it in those exact words. I said it a lot nicer than that, but that's 100% what I meant, and I think she correctly derived my meaning from what I said. Now, of course, her response was essentially, well, I think your measure of smartness is dumb, and I'm not interested in trying to excel according to your metric. Which, I mean, yeah, should have seen that coming. So from there, I was basically like, well, you failed. But that's all good. I'm friends with lots of dumb people, so if you want us to be friends, I can do that. To which she never gave me explicit reply, but her response was hard pass. I want to make it clear that I saw this coming, and, this was astronomically the most likely outcome, and I went into this encounter intentionally, despite knowing that fact. And the way this whole encounter went wasn't really due to any social ineptitude. I guarantee you I could have left the meeting with both of them really liking me and thinking I was a great person. However, going into this, I was like, look, I already have a really great group of mixed dumb and less dumb friends. As it stands, I'm both socially satisfied, and honestly, I'm getting close to being socially saturated. I just don't have the motivation to take on a mediocre relationship which will demand more of my time. Thus, I should really act in a way to ensure I don't form a relationship with these people unless they are genuinely exceptional. So, that's what I intended, and I succeeded. However, after talking to Noah, he brought it to my attention, and it's a valid point, that I could have achieved those same goals without burning bridges in the process. Like, it could have been, on good small talk terms and never talked to them again, and the result would have been equivalent. Thus, in hindsight, I think he's right, and I, in that respect, erred. So, yeah, with that one exception, I think the meeting went well, and I achieved my goals excellently. However, one thing that did happen that left me pleasantly surprised was my interactions with Molly were great. Like, we riffed off each other, we had some great jokes, had some deep conversations, and it was fantastic. I don't know if she was just trying to cover for the immense awkwardness of both of her friends refusing to talk to me, which, if she was, good job, Molly. But she seemed like she genuinely enjoyed the conversation with me, and I really enjoyed the time with Molly. Like, nothing exceptionally deep happened, and the interaction was just quite pleasant and honestly fun. So yeah, in that regard, I actually had a fantastic time. Anyway, all that ended, and I engaged in a long drive back home, and then upon getting back to Fort Collins, I had a subpar Wendy's burger. The new burger just doesn't hold a candle to the bacon pub. There will be great rejoicing in heaven when the bacon pub burger returns to the fold. I then caught up and talked with Ben for a bit before studying philosophy for 2 hours, and I ran out the night with an episode of anime. The next morning was Labor Day, and so I was free from classes. Caleb came over to my house, and I drove him to soccer at Loveland Sports Park, and we had a good conversation during the 30-minute drive, though I can't remember exactly what we talked about. And from there, we just played soccer. It was pretty fun. I didn't put in all that much effort, but there were some good moments for sure. Plus, there was just a ton of people, so that was great. Then we drove back, again having a good conversation, and once we got back, I got to introduce him to the Treat family tradition of Funame, because, let's be honest, it's a tradition at this point in time. We watched Blue Lock, which, given Caleb's soccer background, seemed a fitting start. However, I don't know if he liked the experience, but, he at least experienced it. I'll have to ask him next time I see him. From there, I just texted back and forth with Michael for an hour plus. I have to selectively choose when to respond to that man because he's very talkative. And then from there, I drove over to Neo and Cindy's house where my car and its services were hijacked for the obtaining of pizza and Dutch Bros. Upon successfully doing so, we drove back to the Balance house and started getting ready for D&D. However, during that time, Jeremy thought it would be funny to dump my Lego bin in my car in the front seat. I say funny because it was clearly not out of goodwill. For some reason, ever since Jeremy and I first met, he's never liked me. Like, of all the time I've spent with him, it's been a pretty constant barrage of insults. And I mean, it's not just me, he does it to Neo as well. But in both of our cases, I actually don't know what we did to cause him to act this way. Originally, I included my theory as to why he did this way in the email, but looking back, I don't think it would be really appropriate or fair to Jeremy, so I'll keep that opinion to myself. Regardless, I put up with a lot of small-scale bullying in most cases because it doesn't really, get to me. And let's be honest, socially addressing the issue is challenging. Plus, I don't mind Jeremy aside from that. Like, he brings a great energy to the group, and he can genuinely, be funny sometimes. But the particular dump Lego incident, he pushed the envelope. If you ever had to pick up a dumped out Lego bin, you know how it's like an actual pain. And with what's in the front seat, it was worse because a lot of it went in the cracks, and I couldn't just get the pieces back out. So as opposed to Jeremy's other acts, this particular act inconvenienced me in a tangible way, so it crossed the line. It was an awkward confrontation to be sure. The tension in the room was palpable, but it was absolutely necessary. So yeah, that was an overall unpleasant scenario, but made it through. From there, more D&D happened, though it wasn't very sparkly D&D. It was a lot of combat. And from there, we talked about some stuff, though I don't remember exactly what. And then once I got home, I watched Gravity Falls with Ben, Caleb, and Rebecca. Honestly, that was good. I haven't really hung out with Caleb in a significant capacity in ages. But we're still chill and friends, so honestly, that's just cool. The next day, I had quiet time in the morning, since it was Tuesday, and then after I finished that, I chatted with this philosophy Discord group I just joined. They offered me some good book recommendations. I then did philosophy class studying, tried to 3D print to no avail, and then did more philosophy study until class time came. From there, I did homework before meeting up with my Mech 202 lab group and sawing open this water pump, which took way longer than I should have. People were just slow. I then went to the lamest club gathering I've ever witnessed, which is the ASME gathering. It was literally a folding table out in the field in the oval with 4 boxes of pizza. And that was it. There were no activities, no food, and honestly, no people. It was horrible. Thus, after briefly walking up and taking some of their pizza, I walked away and went to Ratio, since it was a much better expression of, or much better by comparison. During Ratio, I did CAD work, but nevertheless, I listened, and I would say Bald Noah, gave an excellent sermon, though it was a trash apologetics talk. So that was, commendable. After that all ended, Joe, Noah, and I walked around CSU and talked some, and then I went home and watched a bit of YouTube and slept. The next morning, I barely made it to class on time, but I did make it. I then took a very easy thermo quiz. I got a perfect score. And from there, I went on to do some funime before having my stress class, aka the class about stress, not that's stressful. From there, I went to work, and the moment I was waiting for arrived. I was tasked with taking a student. Oh, no, I'm waiting for. Okay, I see. And the moment I arrived, I was tasked with taking a student who had fainted to the hospital via golf cart. I have no idea what happened after I dropped him off, but I got to drive a golf cart, so that was satisfying. I then did homework at work, worked on this little life of demo. I then came home to the house saturated with smoke. So, Mom apparently left meat cooking in a pot and forgot to turn it off, and the stove found out that meat burnt is a very unpleasant smell. So the whole house was filled with meat smoke. I then came back after Dad started airing out the house, but man, the smell was quite strong. There's like a literal film of meatiness over everything now. And the smell is effectively soaked into the walls. It's quite unfortunate. As of late, Mom has put up charcoal bags and now life is tolerable, but for a while there, the smell was actually oppressive. Very glad the house didn't burn down though. I then did Funime before going back over to campus to meet up with my 202 lab partners, which was mildly productive. I then went back home, did more Funime, and then Liam came over and we did an anime quiz for the Battle of the Weebs to be held at Anime Club the next day. Importantly, I beat Liam in one of those training quizzes. It was by a whole point as well. I know, quite the decisive lead. Then, once that ended, I took an anime bath and went to sleep. The following morning was a Tuesday morning, and thus I got to do Tuesday morning kinds of things. I had quite some time, which was actually absolutely lovely, to do those things. I then did philosophy study, worked on some D&D world building, ate some more food before going to class. Then afterward, I did some more D&D world building and ate some more food before going to an anime competition with Liam. There was a surprisingly large turnout of weebs at this event. I think 40 is a reasonable estimate. And so while Liam and I never won any of the rounds, I did get a lot of fourth places. We did get a lot of fourth places and even one second place, which, given there were 36 or so teams, all composed of dedicated weebs, that's quite the accomplishment. Honestly, we're a really good team as far as compensating for each other's weaknesses. We've both watched enough anime that we're able to know the right answer between us almost every single question. So yeah, it was a good time. From there, I taught an inconceivable philosophy class until about midnight 30, and then I got to sleep at 1:30. See, the next morning, I forgot that my schedule was different from Fridays, and thus I could have had an extra hour of sleep in the morning, as my Mech 231 class is only a Monday-Wednesday class. So I woke up at the usual time and felt compelled to chastise myself for squandering the much-needed rest. So after getting ready for the day and being I'm going to fall asleep in class, I decided I'd just go back to bed in my clothes. And honestly, it was a great decision because after that I felt so much better. I then in class around about 12, and hence I had Funime. I then went to work and had a lengthy conversation with Joe after finishing all my homework. After that, since it was Friday, I drove to Loveland and played soccer with the Myers clan and Caleb Christian, and it was a blast. There were a ton of people there, so I made a lot of fun. Also, Deep Voice Noah was there too. I almost forgot him. At the tail end of the game, 2 really good players joined in, and so once the game ended, Noah set up some 3v3s with them, and that was fun. They were good, don't get me wrong, but, it was still fairly evenly matched. From there, I went straight to Alan's house for resume building, but that was terribly painful, and I probably spent 75% of the time just rewriting what I'd written before. Because the first resume builder wasn't actually free, and the second one required you to manually save your work, which is super dumb. So I lost it all twice. So yeah, I mean, I got good food out of the deal, but it was like actual resume building help was very minimal. And in part, it became quite clear that I had nothing to put on my resume, so that made it harder. Like, as far as mechanical engineering goes, I really don't have anything, notable that I can write. So yeah, after roughly 3 hours working on that, I was pretty exhausted, so I called it there, and Alan and I played this very simple card game, and then talked about stuff until 1 a.m. From there, I drove home listening to Relay Theology, and had a brief funame before sleeping. Of course, the following morning, I woke up at 1, and upon gazing at my phone, realized I had received a text from Ben basically saying, "Hey, I'm bored, you want to do something?" So I was like, "Sure." And he came over and we watched some anime together while eating canes. Then we went over to the Durrell Center, played some pool and table tennis, and that was fun. From there, I scheduled to go watch the censored Chainsaw Man with John, and as Ben was leaving, I was like, "Hey, you could join us, want to come?" And he was like, "Yeah, all right," and so he came. Honestly, watching that show with John was probably a mistake. It definitely exceeded my typical standards on quite a few counts, but due to social pressure, I couldn't/wouldn't leave. It's not like it was really bad, but it definitely pushed the envelope for me. Still, it's hard, because John was willing to set this whole thing up and share something he loves with me, and I 100% get how that feels. I don't want to just up and leave during that. So while there was no redeeming feature of that show, it made me glad. There was no redeeming feature of that show that made me glad I stayed. There was something that happened that made me very glad I stayed. See, I met someone philosophically smarter than me. Now, first off, you need to stop and admire that statement. The number of times I've met someone philosophically smarter than me in the last year is either 0 or very close to 0. It just doesn't happen at this point in time, I'll just be honest. So to stumble into someone who knows more about philosophy than I do is already a miracle in and of itself. But he wasn't just smarter than me. He was a PhD student from one of the top 10 schools in the world. Like, he's a super philosopher. So we got talking, right? And I'm able to keep up with what he's saying and engage well. And even though at a few points I had to ask what a word meant, it was a very good conversation. And we were talking about probability theory, and I was totally learning a ton because he was able to address, though not answer, because that would be a strong word for it, the questions I'm currently having about things and, how things work. Now, the downside for all this is for some reason Ethan, our ratio president, felt both equipped and eager to sidetrack the conversation when there were a few points where he was like, sidetrack the conversation. And there were a few points where I'm like, you know what? Maybe he's equipped to engage in this conversation. And then every one of those impressions was very fading, as when he kept talking, it became very clear he did not know what was going on. And so I, having found the first person in a year who was an S-tier mind, was forced to patiently wait for Ethan to run out of steam and realize he was just not even close to this dude's level. And it took like an hour, but it did eventually happen. And me and the philosopher man, his name is Toby, by the way, were finally able to talk again. So yeah, that was immensely painful. But anyway, we got to finish our conversation at like 11 or so, and that was fantastic. And the greatest thing that could happen did happen. As we were wrapping up, Toby said, and I quote, "You could hold your own in a top 10 school. The world explodes, pigs fly, and the Queen of England is resurrected. Unicorns are real." You have actually no idea how big of a deal that one sentence was to me. A philosopher from one of the best schools in the world, able to finish the highest degree of education possible, just said, "Yeah, you're basically at my level." Do you understand how big of a compliment that is? Like, this guy just confirmed all my arduous work and effort has indeed brought me to the upper echelons of philosophical thought. Like, I'm not just good, I'm really good. And unprompted, the one dude that could evaluate if in fact I was really good said so. So yeah, I was so hyped about that statement, I compulsively walked around CSU for an hour. And then I rambled to Joe about it on my phone for 20 minutes, about just how pumped I was. Like, I haven't been that excited about almost anything in ages. The other thing that happened that night was I watched one more episode of Darwin's Game with Benj, and I also spontaneously raced some guys over on campus during my manic phase. And I won, of course. But those aren't important. What matters is Toby said I could hold my own at a top 10 school. And yeah, I got to sleep at like 2:30, and I was very, very excited. I'm scheduled to do a philosophy day with Toby around the 25th of September, so I'm very excited for that too. The next morning, I woke up early for church, at which point I got to talk about Catholic things during lunch, which was quite enjoyable. And that conversation was quite charitable, so yeah, that made it nice. I don't know, I just like talking about the Catholics. I then skipped D&D and went over to John's house, where we had a giant, two-headed giant Magic the Gathering pre-release event, which was pretty fun. Seth and I, not John's house, Joe's house. I then teamed up with Seth, and we got really close to, we had some really close calls, and we were barely able to manage to come out on top. But we ended up losing horribly in Neo and Sydney in unanticipated upsets, and so we lost the whole tournament as a result. Still, I think we and everyone else had a good time. I will say, however, the games took forever, especially Seth and mine, so that was a bit painful. Oh, and the really important thing is I got 3 anime cards with anime art. One of which I pulled, which happened to be like the most expensive card in the set, so that was cool. And 2 which I traded exorbitantly for, from Noah and Joe. It was basically like card values, no object kind of trades, which is the first time I've ever done that. And now I know how rich people feel. So yeah, I got some cool looking Magic cards. After that whole event, I drove home, got my fancy font for D&D to work. I didn't know you could make up your own fonts and install them on your computer until like a few weeks ago, but that's actually so cool. Once I achieved that, I tried to fix and diagnose what was wrong with my family's dryer, largely to no avail. It turned out my diagnosis was wrong, so that's only a further fail. And then I rounded out the night, or out the day, with an anabath. The next day I had classes, and those were mostly normal, except after my thermal class, I got up to leave, and Steven, one of my lab mates for that class, at least according to Evan, that was the name of the guy I talked to, looked at me and seemed to gesture me over. So I walked down, and I was like, "What's up?" And Steven was like, "Oh, I didn't call you over." And I was like, "Oh, sorry, my bad. Well, if you need me to sit by you guys, since we're teammates and all, let me know, okay?" Stefan then gave me this really pained and awkward smile, and he gave me one of those, like, limp points, the kind of point you make when you're trying to hide that you're pointing, and he said something like, "You should, what?" I was like, "What?" Still giving me that half cringe, half smile, he was like, "You should have probably talked to him." And he points to the professor. And I'm like, "What for?" This time both confused and concerned. See, I had suspected that me sitting apart from the rest of the group, since the front row is to be avoided above all else, had lessened my social significance. Thus I feared that I perhaps had been dropped from the team without being notified. Each team can have 5 members, and it just so happened, as the class wore on, 5 people had begun to sit in the front row. And so I was like, well, they all looked like they knew each other. And so Stefan called me over, and I was like, I'm going to get yeeted, aren't I? And then Stefan responded and was like, "To find a team." And my suspicions were confirmed. At this point, I'm sure my expression gave some away of what I was feeling, but I tried to respond terribly. I was like, "Oh, well, all good. I totally understand if me being part of the group isn't mutually beneficial. Still, I would have appreciated if you would have told me you guys were dropping me." At which point, Stefan's expression became a bit more painful, and after fishing through his phone for a moment, he brought up a text where Evan said, "I met another guy named Liam who I was looking for a group, and he seemed like a good potential member. He sat in the front row with Daniel and I." And, like, I don't get how the text meant I was out, especially because when it was sent, we only had 4 members, and so we could have 5, and there was still room for me in the group. Regardless, though, Stefan's expression made it quite clear I was off the team. So I just responded, "Oh, I guess I misunderstood that. Well, thanks for clarifying." And with that, I walked away. Honestly, a pretty gutting feeling to be dropped like that, but I biked home and compiled a charitable text that said, "No hard feelings that I was dropped. You know, I would have appreciated if you guys made that clearer, but I get it. And if we ever get the chance, I'd still like to work with you in the future." But then Evan, the guy whose team lead I had actually joined, was like, "I still want you on the team." And so, yeah, it turned out that this has not been an executive decision, and that Evan was like, "Giant red stamp, overrule." So, yeah, I'm still on the team, and now I just have to awkwardly work alongside the guy who wanted me off the team for this semester project, which I'm sure will be fine. I'm a master of my social craft. Anyway, that was an experience, but it actually turned out well. All because I decided to repair and restore a relationship that I perceived was unkind. So yeah, this is why you don't ghost people. Anyway, I had a fast food me, as I had a good amount of time. I spent a good amount of time on that textual conversation, and then I returned to the day as normal. The other thing that happened is that a template I made way back and spent like 3 hours perfecting. Yeah, my coworker found one that was just like on Word in like 15 minutes. So yeah, I felt dumb. The rest of the day at work, I spent making NPC characters for the pre-sessions, and I did that for over 2 hours. I made a lot of very cool characters. And from there, I went over to Joe's house and ate food before pseudo-helping D&D characters for the campaign I'm starting. Woot woot! But if I'm honest, Neo did all the actual work. That went on for a while, and afterward I started doing pre-sessions with people, and honestly, that was quite a bit of fun. Grace and Noah's pre-sessions were absolute gold. Grace got a clip from it. This is going to be such a good campaign. Also, I remixed it with AI. Yeah, after that, I went to sleep. The next morning, I had a hard time focusing on quiet time, but I pushed through nevertheless. I then tried to 3D print with no success recording the class and lab. I then, after lab, was able to get some 3D prints started. I then made more D&D stuff, went to Ratio once more, where I met a face I haven't seen in like 2, maybe 3 years. See, his name is Gabe, and he's a math nerd to the nth degree. See, that's a math joke. And although most math jokes are infinitely more funny than normal jokes, this one is this is such the degree of alpha 1. That's another math joke. I wonder if jokes are proportionally funny to the amount of the populace that can understand them. Like, perhaps the more people that understand, the lower the quality of the haha that they hold. This would explain why, most inside jokes are the funniest jokes, because, they're the least populous, like the fewest to understand them. And further, why existential comics are the funniest comics in existence, because many can't recognize their objective, hilariousness. But if this is true, then jokes that are understood by only one member that makes up a singleton set would then be the funniest one in that set. Yet this seems counterintuitive. Yet perhaps the only reason we find it counterintuitive is because while jokes are, made to ourselves are in fact the funniest sort, they don't promote social cohesion and thus they lack purpose. They're nihilistic jokes. And since dark humor is statistically proven to be the least accepted form of humor, perhaps we ought to reject nihilistic jokes due to their very nature. And even if we recognize that it's no fault of their own that caused them to be this way, we can banish them into eternal separation from our presence nonetheless. Now, it seems my reasoning has intractably led me back to the problem of evil, where God is me and we are jokes. And it seems as if there might be a deep, if not heretical, meaning of those words. And while I wish to explore that meaning as an exercise in pointless curiosity, I don't particularly wish to explore heresy. Thus, I can't say what I can't say, and I can't whistle it either. that was refreshing. Moving on. So Gabe, yes, this whole tangent began somewhere meaningful. He's like, math word. Is this working? And I'm like, yes. And we had a good conversation. See, I actually do know a good degree of math, not because of my degree, but because I've actually had to study some fairly advanced mathematical concepts to try and understand some philosophical notions. So first off, I was able to accurately recall some mega obscure math information I learned about space-time manifolds out of the archives, which I was impressed with myself for. And second, the whole conversation just seemed extraordinary to me because, we were able to pick up talking when we left off like 3 years ago. So one, why do I even remember that conversation? Like, way back when, I was just floundering, trying to keep up and not look stupid with this math nerd as he slung math words at me. Two, why do we both assume that we hold the same positions we were able to talk about with one another way, 3 years ago? Like, 3 years have passed. Shouldn't we have changed? And three, why has time started to move in such a way that 3 years feels like 3 months? These are all oddities that impress themselves upon me, and this is why I bothered to write about that experience here. Anyway, the conversation was brought to a halt by the Rasher lecture starting, and so I sat in my favorite corner and did CAD work during the lecture. I then listened to Alan talk about D&D for an age before going to walk with Noah around campus and discussing a variety of things. Once we got back, there was still some time before the night ended, so Ben showed me D&D Gravity Falls episode, and it was kind of funny. Deliberately, definitely a few inside jokes that only a D&D player would really get in that episode. And yeah, I watched an anime episode and went to bed. The next day at school, did Funime, got my quiz back, and got a fat 100 on it. I'm big smart. Did work on this life email at work, and then went down to the Idea Product Lab to 3D print. Had Funime, met up with my lab mates, and disassembled a slump pump. And then finally, that concludes the school activities. After that, it was about 8 at night, but David and I had previously planned to go play tennis, though I forgot I had to meet up with my lab mates, so that ended up happening earlier than I thought it did. Anyway, we decided we should still do it anyway, and even though it was late, we went and played tennis at Rollingwood Park. And honestly, we both suck. We got like a good 4 rallies in, and literally out of like 99 games, I won 50 and he won 49. Like, it was stupidly even matched, but not in like a good I played a beautiful game way, but rather than that we both suck at this equally way. Once I got home from that, I started Grace on Alicization, the best SAO season, and we ate pizza. I then did philosophy study for an hour and a half before going to bed. Next morning, I had quiet time before going to a doctor's appointment, and then I got back and 3D printed. From there, I had Funime, went to class, and after class, I found I could steal the exact gears I had used from my previously catted SolidWorks thing, and I felt like an idiot. Because I just, catted them instead. And then I got back home and did CAD work whilst I Gabe played in the background for 2 hours. I then did Funime with Grace, drove out to Loveland, played soccer death for an hour, and then drove back and gave my lecture at my philosophy class, and then went home and went to sleep. Friday, I had class, did CAD work, did more classes, and did more work. Though I only spent about an hour and a half actually working. The rest was spent on this life and email. And then, since that was such a day, I went and vacuumed my car. Apparently, Ben and I thought alike because he had the exact same thought, and we made sure at the cleaning place. I then got oil and a bad but delicious food from Walmart. Got queued up with Ben and caught up, and then Benj came over to hang. We watched some Darwin's game, and I hit up the household side of the Neo friend group, and we agreed to play a game of Speed Seek, and that's what we did. I caught Benj early on, but honestly, he's grown a ton. So much so that, when I saw him across the plaza, I didn't recognize his body shape. Still, this random dude just ducked behind a pillar, and I was like, that's pretty suspicious behavior, so I should check it out. Anyway, it was a furious chase, and the only reason I ended up catching him was because he ducked into an alley that didn't have a sidewalk, and you're only permitted to run on sidewalks, so it was effectively a dead end. But otherwise, I'm pretty sure he would have gotten away. I then caught Sydney after 30 minutes of circling this general area she was hiding in, and she found a super good hiding spot, but I happened to stumble upon it. Amazingly, despite my games of Speed Seek prior, I'd never encountered this spot before. But then, that only left Neo and Alan. And see, I thought I knew how Neo played. Find a spot and not move. And so, when they gave me one clear picture where I knew where they were, I spent the last 30 minutes of the game just going around that spot. And in reality, they moved right after that picture. So, yeah. Really, the loss was because I miscalculated what Neo would do. And apparently, Alan was the one deciding what they would do, since they were the team of 2. And I guess it's no wonder I got it wrong then. I really have no idea how Alan thinks in this game. So yeah, Sydney did manage to get back in the game before the game ended, and that was that. I then walked over to the Balance house, and Benj walked back to my house so he could drive himself home. I then played Magic with Neo and Sydney until 1:30 in the morning. Saturday, I woke up at 2 in the afternoon, studied philosophy for an hour and a half, did Funime, cleaned my Rocket books while listening to Magic of Reason videos, which honestly is a pretty time-consuming endeavor. I think I spent an hour cleaning my Rocket books, and that's not super fast, but, I suppose it's one downside of the system is having to clean them. I then headed over to Neo's for Magic and discovered Sydney had made her jalapeno poppers, which were amazing. Oh my gosh, they were so good. My mouth is actually watering as I think about them. And yeah, I hung out there until until the food and Magic opportunities ran out. I then came home, watched Blue Lock with Mom before working on D&D monster making, while listening to Pints of Aquinas till midnight. Sunday, I went to church, taught this random kid how to play Magic. I then went to D&D, and we had a very good conversation. I ate some sandwiches before Bible study had started, and then I went home to study philosophy, only to discover that I left my computer at the Balance. So after debating with Logos, a philosophy guy I was scheduled to talk to on Wednesday, I then drove back to the Balance and hung with them and while I read my Bayesian anthology in the corner, as I did Bible study. We then all went to visit the fountains on MSU's campus. MSU. I think it's CSU. Yeah, CSU campus. And we talked about stuff. I raced Alan and Neo during that walk, and of course I won. Though I will admit Alan was close. And then once we got back, we played some Halo Firefight, where me and John were trying to beat the Covenant and Neo, and we lost repeatedly. And yeah, I went home, did food and slept. Monday classes, I willed myself to focus mode. I put in extra effort to pay attention because things were starting to go over my head and I needed to make sure I wasn't left behind. I then came home from Funame, went to work where I watched my solids class lecture, and then did homework as well as worked on these left emails. It was then that Diana, one of my coworkers, brought in a giant bag of homegrown peppers, most of which were jalapenos. So me, having absolutely loved Sydney's jalapeno peppers last time, decided this was a divine sign that more jalapeno peppers needed to be eaten. Thus I texted Sydney and Alan, and they agreed to do a jalapeno pepper showdown, since both, claimed their recipe was better than the other. And so the best kind of competition began. The kind where I win either way. So that was great. I then drove straight to Joe's house after picking up Neo and dropping off the peppers, because Karina had gotten back from Switzerland and was joining the D&D campaign. And so we rushed over to do her pre-session. As soon as I got to Joe's house, I then got started on that, and yeah, it was kind of meh, but it was a good pre-session nonetheless. We then all had food, and then for realsies D&D began, and it was glorious. Oh my gosh, everyone did fantastic. There was a beautiful balance of shenanigans and following the storyline, and everyone got the opportunity to make a meaningful impact in the roleplay. Also, man, the roleplay was great. Probably my favorite D&D session to be part of thus far. So I kind of wish I had my own character in the campaign, though. Anyway, it was good, and we got to the point where the party encountered the beast they were hired to kill, the dragon serpent. Also, you have no idea how much time it took in Midjourney trying to generate areas for this campaign. Like, don't get me wrong, it's cool that I can make custom images from art with AI, but man, it still takes ages. So yeah, that was honestly one of my favorite things ever. Just getting to see all my friends work together in roleplay was just very, very cool. I really enjoyed it. After the campaign, we all played Magic till about, 11:15, because I live half an hour away. And yep, I drove Neo home. I drove Neo home and went to sleep. Tuesday morning, I had quiet time, which was nice. I then worked on my philosophy class for ages before turning over to CSU, or before going over to CSU to 3D print. I then found my computer. Yep, I remember that thing. It's dead for realsies now, and so I need to still pay the guy. So yeah, I was generous and gave him $60 more than he was asking, because I know how it feels to spend months on a project and it still fails. But still, I dropped like $350 on a computer only for it to be as dead as it was originally. So yeah, now I have a dead gaming computer. So that's fun. I then went to class, got back, and did D&D prep while listening to Pines with Aquinas for 2 hours and 30 minutes. Oh, and I folded clothes. I then went to Ratio, did CAD work while most of my homebrew theodicies got voted down, and then I studied philosophy at home for an hour and a half before doing some Funame and working on the big brain thoughts until 1. However, the next day, as you might have suspected, I woke up sleep deprived, so that sucked. I went to classes, took a thermo quiz, which I'm very confident I did poorly on, did Funame, went to classes, worked, and tried to fix the stupid copy machine for an hour, only to have someone else come in and fix the problem by accident. I only got a little homework done that day. I then did Funame, joined my classmates at the Morgan Library for some homework, talked with Logos, and then a philosopher guy that I mentioned earlier, about Thomism alternatives, which he wasn't happy with at all. Also, he's only as smart as me, and I was kind of a bit of a letdown. I then made this baby 86 anime edit before going to bed. The next morning, I slept in and accidentally missed my advising appointment because I thought it was later than it was. And then CSU sent me like this, "You've been absent from a scheduled appointment" email. And I'm like wondering if that effectively means I got like a demerit or something. I then went to the doctor again, got back and 3D printed, and had no class of IEE, or no class due to IEE or something like that. It's basically the aerospace engineering hiring event. And so I spent the rest of the day researching. I then attended the marvelous Jalapeno Popper Showdown after much deliberation and deemed Alan the victor, though both were very good. I then ate jalapeno poppers until I actually couldn't anymore, and that was the best thing ever. And then I played an arduous Magic game with Neo and Sydney. I went home, bought an e-bike, Control-Z'd buying my e-bike, and then went to sleep. The next day I woke up the way I intended, and then I proceeded to do a very long Funame session, as it took me ages to eat my breakfast. My stomach was in knots, and I really didn't feel like eating. I then researched some more, had classes, picked up my third iteration of my airsoft gun prototype, which is coming along fairly well, I must say. And then I also got after-hours access to the Idea to Product Lab, so that was great. I then suffered through a long day of work before getting home and having fantastic salmon with veggie rice meal that was prepared by my great mother. It was very good. And then from there I went on a long walk around the City Park Lake. Played some Magic games with Neo over the Laureate Student Center, did some more research, and then had Funame before going to sleep. And that brings us to today, where thus far I have finished this life of the email. Woo! And that's it. Hope you are well, and I shall renew my battle cry, this time exponentially with more vigor and determination. Not dead yet!